Ethan had always considered himself a reasonable man. Trusting, even. In his 10 years of marriage to Claire, there had never been a moment he doubted her loyalty. They were partners in every sense of the word, sharing responsibilities, dreams, and occasional missteps. Their life together wasn't perfect, but it was stable, or so Ethan thought, until the day he saw the photo. It started on a Thursday evening, just after Ethan had finished his work-from-home day. He was scrolling through social media while waiting for Claire to get home from her yoga class. As he mindlessly flipped through vacation photos and motivational quotes, a picture on his friend Ben's profile stopped him cold. There, in crisp resolution, was Claire, his Claire, standing arm in arm with another man at what looked like a trendy rooftop bar. The caption beneath the photo read, "Great night out with some fantastic people." Ethan's eyes darted to the timestamp. The photo had been posted just an hour earlier. His first reaction was confusion. Claire had told him she'd be at yoga tonight. How could she be at a bar with some guy? And who was this man? He didn't look familiar, tall, broad-shouldered, with an easy smile that made Ethan's stomach twist. He stared at the picture, his mind racing. Claire wasn't dressed for yoga. She was wearing a sleek black dress, the kind she usually saved for date nights. Her smile was wide, her posture relaxed, her body angled slightly toward the stranger. Ethan's chest tightened. This wasn't just a casual group photo, it felt intimate. Too intimate. When Claire walked through the door an hour later, Ethan was still sitting on the couch, the photo pulled up on his phone. She looked tired but cheerful, her yoga mat slung over her shoulder. "Hey, babe," she said, kicking off her sneakers. "How was your day?" Ethan forced a smile, trying to keep his voice steady. "It was fine." "How was yoga?" Claire hesitated for a fraction of a second, so brief that if Ethan hadn't been watching her closely, he might have missed it. "Good," she said. "Same old routine. I think I'm finally getting the hang of that crow pose." Ethan nodded, his mind churning. Should he bring up the photo? Confront her outright? Or would it be better to wait and gather more information? He decided to play it cool, at least for now. "That's great," he said. "You must be starving after all that exercise. Want me to order something?" Claire smiled. "Sure. Sushi." "Perfect." As Claire disappeared into the bedroom to change, Ethan stared at the photo again. His gut told him something was wrong, but he needed more proof. The next morning, Ethan reached out to Ben, the friend who had posted the photo. "Hey, man," Ethan texted. "Saw your post last night. Who was the guy with Claire in that picture?" Ben responded quickly. "Oh, that's Ryan. He's a friend of Claire's from work. They showed up at the rooftop bar last night for a couple of drinks." "Why?" Ethan frowned. "Just curious. Claire didn't mention it. Thought she was at yoga." Ben's reply came after a brief pause. "Weird. Maybe she stopped by after." It was a chill night. Everyone seemed to be having fun. Ethan thanked Ben and set his phone down, his unease deepening. Claire hadn't mentioned anything about meeting a work friend for drinks, much less skipping yoga. Why would she lie? That evening, Ethan decided to test the waters. "Did you see Ben's post yesterday?" he asked casually as they sat down to dinner. Claire looked up from her plate, her expression neutral. "No, I don't think so." "Why?" "Oh, he posted some pictures from a rooftop bar. Looked like a fun night." Claire's fork froze mid-air, her smile faltering for a split second before she recovered. "Oh, yeah. That was the place I told you about, the one near my office. A few of us from work went there a while back." Ethan tilted his head, pretending to be curious. "A while back? Are you sure? The picture looked recent." Claire laughed nervously. "Maybe he reposted it. I don't know, I wasn't there last night. Ethan nodded slowly, his suspicion solidifying. She was lying again. The following day, Ethan decided to do something he'd never done before. He looked through Claire's phone. He waited until she was in the shower, then unlocked her device using the passcode he'd seen her enter 100 times. He hated himself for it, but the gnawing doubt had become unbearable. Her text messages revealed nothing unusual, just conversations with friends and coworkers. But when he opened her social media app, he found something that made his stomach drop. Claire had exchanged direct messages with Ryan, the man from the photo. The messages weren't overtly romantic, but there was a familiarity to their tone that made Ethan's skin crawl. Ryan, last night was fun. We should do it again soon. Claire, definitely. I'll let you know when I'm free. Ethan stared at the screen, his heart pounding. She had lied to him, met this man behind his back, and now they were planning to meet again. He put the phone back before Claire finished her shower, his mind racing. He didn't know the full story yet, but one thing was clear, this wasn't just a misunderstanding. Ethan couldn't shake the sinking feeling in his gut. Claire's messages to Ryan were casual, almost friendly, but combined with the rooftop photo and her lies about yoga, they painted a much darker picture. The woman he thought he knew, the wife who had always been open with him, was now a stranger hiding secrets behind a polished smile. That night, Ethan barely slept. His mind cycled through endless questions, each one twisting the knife deeper. Who exactly was Ryan? How long had Claire been seeing him? And most importantly, was it innocent, or something far worse? By the next morning, Ethan had decided on his next move. He needed answers, and if Claire wasn't going to give them to him, he'd find them himself. Ethan started with Ryan. His name was the only solid lead Ethan had, and he hoped it would be enough. Using social media, he found Ryan's profile easily. It was public, filled with photos of him at work events, dinners, and trips. Ryan's job title was listed as Senior Marketing Executive at the same firm where Claire worked. Ethan scrolled through Ryan's posts, looking for anything that connected him to Claire. It didn't take long to find it. A photo from 2 months ago showed Ryan and Claire standing side by side at what appeared to be an office party. Claire was holding a glass of champagne, her head tilted slightly toward Ryan as they smiled for the camera. The caption read, "Great night with some of the best teammates around." Ethan's jaw clenched. He'd never seen this photo before, and Claire had never mentioned Ryan's name. How had she been spending so much time with this man without it ever coming up? Ethan kept scrolling, his frustration growing. There were no overt signs of an affair, no inappropriate comments or suspicious posts, but the sheer number of photos they appeared in together was enough to make his stomach churn. That evening, Ethan decided to confront Claire directly. "Claire," he said as they sat down to dinner, "I've been thinking about that photo Ben posted." Claire froze for just a fraction of a second before forcing a smile. "Oh. Still hung up on that? I told you, it was an old picture." Ethan nodded, his expression calm but his voice firm. "You also said you didn't know Ryan that well. But I looked him up. He works with you, doesn't he?" Claire's fork clattered against her plate. She stared at him, her face a mix of shock and defensiveness. "You looked him up?" "Yes," Ethan said, leaning forward. "And it seems like you've spent a lot of time with him, more than you let on." Claire's expression shifted, and Ethan saw the faintest flicker of guilt in her eyes. "Ethan," she began, her voice wavering, "I don't know what you're trying to accuse me of, but—" "I'm not accusing you of anything," Ethan interrupted. "I just want the truth. Why did you lie about being at yoga? Why didn't you tell me you were meeting Ryan?" Claire opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. For the first time, she looked genuinely rattled. I didn't want you to misunderstand," she said finally. "Ryan and I are just friends. That's all. The drinks were spur of the moment, and I didn't think it was a big deal. I wasn't trying to hide anything. Ethan's eyes narrowed. If it wasn't a big deal, why didn't you tell me about it? Claire hesitated, then sighed. Because I know how you get sometimes, Ethan. You overthink things. I didn't want to cause unnecessary drama. Ethan leaned back, his frustration mounting. So instead, you lied to me and snuck around? That's supposed to make me feel better. Claire stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I can't believe you're doing this, she said, her voice rising. I've been nothing but loyal to you, and now you're acting like I've committed some crime. I can't even have friends without being interrogated. Ethan stared at her, his chest tightening. Friends don't lie about meeting each other, Claire. Friends don't sneak off to rooftop bars and exchange late-night messages. Claire's face flushed, and she turned away, crossing her arms. This is ridiculous, she muttered. Believe what you want, Ethan. And with that, she walked out of the room, leaving Ethan sitting alone at the table. The next day, Ethan confided in his sister, Rachel, someone he had always trusted with his problems. Do you think she's cheating? Rachel asked after Ethan finished recounting the story. I don't know, Ethan admitted. But she's definitely hiding something. Rachel frowned, tapping her fingers against her coffee cup. It might not be an affair, but whatever it is, it's big enough that she's afraid to tell you. Have you thought about following her? Seeing where she goes when she says she's at yoga or out with friends? Ethan hesitated. The idea of following Claire felt wrong, invasive. But at the same time, his gut told him that Rachel was right. He needed to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. I don't know if I can go that far, Ethan said. Rachel placed a hand on his arm. Ethan, you're not going to find peace until you have answers. Sometimes, you have to fight for the truth. That evening, Ethan made his decision. He would follow Claire the next time she went out. If she had nothing to hide, he would apologize and move on. But if she was lying again, his opportunity came sooner than he expected. The following night, Claire announced that she was heading to yoga again. Ethan nodded casually, pretending to be absorbed in his laptop. Have fun, he said. The moment she left, Ethan grabbed his jacket and keys. He followed her car at a safe distance, his heart pounding in his chest. To his surprise, Claire didn't head toward the yoga studio. Instead, she drove across town to a quiet, upscale restaurant. Ethan parked a few spots away, his pulse racing as he watched her get out of the car. She wasn't carrying her yoga mat. Inside the restaurant, Ethan caught a glimpse of her being greeted by Ryan, who stood and pulled out her chair like a gentleman. They exchanged smiles before sitting down, leaning in close as they began to talk. Ethan's hands tightened around the steering wheel as he watched from the car. His worst fears were coming true, but he wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. Instead, he took out his phone and snapped a photo of the two of them through the window. If Claire wasn't going to give him answers, he would find them another way. Ethan couldn't take his eyes off Claire and Ryan through the restaurant window. They were seated at a small, dimly lit table near the corner, their faces close as they spoke. Claire's expression was animated, her smile wide, the kind of smile she used to give Ethan before their relationship fell into the routines of daily life. It wasn't the kind of dinner two colleagues would have, Ethan thought bitterly. There was an undeniable intimacy in their body language, the way Ryan leaned slightly forward, hanging on to every word Claire said, and the way her hand rested casually on the table, dangerously close to his. For what felt like hours, Ethan sat in his car, torn between anger and devastation. He wanted to burst into the restaurant, demand answers, but something held him back. He needed to be sure. When Claire and Ryan finally left the restaurant, Ethan watched as Ryan opened the door for her, his hand brushing the small of her back. The gesture was brief, but it set Ethan's nerves on fire. He followed them as they walked to their cars, his pulse racing. To his relief, and confusion, they parted ways. Claire got into her car and drove off, while Ryan walked to his own car in the opposite direction. Ethan hesitated for a moment before deciding to follow Claire. When Claire got home, Ethan was already there, sitting on the couch, pretending to be engrossed in a TV show. She walked in casually, her yoga mat nowhere in sight. "Hey," she said, giving him a quick kiss on the cheek. "How was your evening?" Ethan forced a smile. "Fine. How was yoga?" Claire hesitated for the briefest moment before responding. "It was good. We did a lot of core work tonight. I'm going to feel it tomorrow." Ethan's stomach churned. She didn't even flinch as she lied to his face. The next morning, Ethan called Ryan. He hadn't planned to take this route, but the more he thought about it, the more he realized that Ryan might slip up if caught off guard. "Hello." Ryan's voice was friendly, confident. "Ryan, this is Ethan," he said, his tone steady. There was a pause. "Ethan," Ryan repeated slowly, as though searching his memory. "Claire's husband." "That's right," Ethan replied. "I wanted to talk to you about last night. About the dinner you had with Claire." Another pause, this one longer. Sure," Ryan said finally, though his voice had lost some of its confidence. "What about it?" "I just want to know what's going on," Ethan said bluntly. "Why are you meeting my wife behind my back?" Ryan chuckled nervously. "Look, Ethan, I think you've got the wrong idea. Claire and I are colleagues. That's all. Colleagues who have secret dinners at fancy restaurants." Ethan pressed. "Nothing secret about it," Ryan replied, his voice tightening. "It was a business meeting. We're working on a project together." "Funny," Ethan said, his tone sharp. "Because Claire told me she was at yoga last night. So which one of you is lying?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line before Ryan spoke again. "Ethan, I don't think it's appropriate for me to get involved in whatever issues you and Claire are having. If you have questions, you should ask her." With that, Ryan hung up, leaving Ethan gripping the phone in frustration. That evening, Ethan decided to confront Claire again. This time, he wasn't going to hold back. "Claire," he said after dinner, "we need to talk." Claire looked up from her phone, her expression wary. "What's wrong?" "I know you weren't at yoga last night," Ethan said, his voice steady but firm. "I know you were at dinner with Ryan." Claire's face paled. For a moment, she didn't say anything, her eyes darting to the side as if searching for an escape. "Ethan," she began, "it's not what you think." "Don't," Ethan interrupted, his voice rising. "Don't tell me it's not what I think. I saw you, Claire. I followed you to the restaurant. I saw you with him." Claire's jaw dropped, and she stared at him in shock. "You followed me?" "Yes," Ethan said, unflinching. "Because you lied to me. Over and over again. You told me you were at yoga, but you were having dinner with another man. So now I want the truth. Who is Ryan to you?" Claire stood, crossing her arms defensively. "He's my co-worker, Ethan. That's it. We've been working on a big project together, and we decided to grab dinner to go over some details. It's completely professional." Ethan shook his head, his anger boiling over. "Professional? Are you kidding me? You lied to me about where you were. You didn't have to do that if it was just a work dinner. I didn't tell you because I knew you'd react like this." Claire shot back. "You're blowing this way out of proportion." "You're the one who made it suspicious," Ethan retorted. "If it's innocent, why not just tell me the truth?" Claire's eyes filled with tears, and she looked away. "Because things haven't been the same between us lately," she said softly. "You've been distant, distracted. I didn't want to make things worse." Ethan's heart ached at her words, but he didn't let his guard down. "That doesn't explain why you've been lying to me," he said. "Or why you're meeting Ryan so often. Are you cheating on me, Claire? Claire's eyes snapped back to his, wide with shock. No, she exclaimed. Ethan, I swear, I'm not cheating on you. I would never do that. Then tell me the truth, Ethan said, his voice breaking. The whole truth. Right now. Claire hesitated, her tears spilling over. It's not what you think, she said finally. But it's not something I can explain in a single conversation. Try me, Ethan said, his tone hard. Claire wiped her eyes and took a deep breath. There's more to this than you realize, she said. And if you want the truth, you need to prepare yourself. Because it's not going to be easy to hear. Ethan sat frozen, Claire's words echoing in his mind. There's more to this than you realize. Her tears were real, her hesitation genuine, but the shadows of her lies loomed over them both. I want the truth, Ethan said, his voice firm despite the tightness in his chest. Whatever it is, just tell me. Claire nodded, wiping her eyes as she sat down across from him. Okay, she said softly. But you have to promise me something. Promise me you'll hear me out before jumping to conclusions. Ethan clenched his jaw. I'll listen. But I can't promise I won't react. Claire hesitated, then began. Ryan and I have been working together on a major deal for months. It's a high-stakes project, and the pressure has been overwhelming. At first, we kept things professional, but over time, we started talking about more than work, our lives, our stresses, everything. Ethan's stomach churned. That doesn't sound professional. Claire shook her head. It wasn't, she admitted. But it wasn't romantic either. It was just easy to talk to him. He understood what I was going through because he was going through it too. Ethan's fists tightened. And the dinners? The lies? Was that just talking, too? Yes, Claire said quickly. I swear, Ethan, there's nothing physical between us. Nothing romantic. But I lied because I knew how it looked, and I didn't want you to misunderstand. I didn't want you to think this. Ethan leaned back, crossing his arms. So, you were sneaking around with another man, lying to me about it, and now you want me to believe it was all innocent? Claire's eyes filled with fresh tears. It's the truth, she said. But there's something else you need to know. Ethan's stomach dropped. What? Ryan's been hiding something, Claire said, her voice trembling. And I think he's been using me to cover it up. Ethan frowned, trying to make sense of her words. Cover up what? Claire hesitated, then leaned closer. Ryan's been doing things behind the scenes, shady deals, falsifying reports, manipulating clients. At first, I didn't notice because I was so focused on my part of the project. But a few weeks ago, I found something in one of his files, emails that didn't match up with what he'd been telling our team. What kind of emails? Ethan asked. Emails that showed he'd been redirecting funds, Claire said. Not a lot, just small amounts at a time, but over months it's added up. I confronted him about it, and he told me it was nothing, just a misunderstanding. But the more I dug, the worse it got. And then he started. She trailed off, her voice breaking. He started what? Ethan pressed. He started threatening me, Claire whispered. He said if I told anyone, he'd make sure I was implicated too. He'd plant evidence, make it look like I was part of it. Ethan's blood ran cold. And you believed him? Claire nodded. He has the connections to do it. He knows people in the company, people who would take his side. I didn't know what to do, Ethan. I've been trying to gather enough evidence to protect myself, but I didn't want to drag you into it. Ethan stared at her, his emotions a tangled mess. Her story sounded plausible, but could he trust it? Or was this just another lie, a desperate attempt to explain away her behavior? Why didn't you tell me sooner? He asked, his voice hard. Because I was scared, Claire said. And because I didn't want you to think I'd done something wrong. I thought I could handle it on my own, but I was wrong. Ethan shook his head, frustration bubbling to the surface. You should have come to me, Claire. You should have trusted me. I know, Claire said, tears streaming down her face. And I'm sorry. I was trying to protect you, but I only made things worse. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. Claire's confession had left him reeling. If what she said about Ryan was true, then she was caught in a dangerous situation, one that could ruin her career and possibly their lives. But part of him still couldn't shake the doubts. What if she was lying? What if this was just a convenient excuse to cover up something more personal? The next morning, Ethan made a decision. If Claire wasn't going to share everything, he'd find out the truth himself. Ethan reached out to Ryan under the guise of wanting to clear the air. He sent a carefully worded email, framing the meeting as an opportunity to better understand the situation. To his surprise, Ryan agreed almost immediately. When they met later that day at a local coffee shop, Ryan seemed as calm and confident as ever. He greeted Ethan with a firm handshake and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Ethan, Ryan said, sitting down across from him. What can I do for you? Ethan didn't bother with pleasantries. I want to know what's going on with you and Claire. Ryan raised an eyebrow, his expression amused. I told you before, Ethan. Claire and I are colleagues. That's all. I don't believe you, Ethan said bluntly. Claire told me about the threats, the fake emails, the missing funds. I want the truth, Ryan. For a moment, Ryan's mask slipped. His jaw tightened, and a flicker of annoyance crossed his face. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. I don't know what Claire's been telling you, Ryan said smoothly. But whatever it is, it's not true. She's been under a lot of stress lately, and I think she's looking for someone to blame. Blame for what? Ethan asked. Ryan leaned back, his smile turning cold. For her mistakes, he said. If you want to know the truth, Ethan, you should be asking Claire why she's been spending so much time with me. She's the one who reached out to me, not the other way around. Ethan's stomach churned. What are you saying? I'm saying that Claire has been hiding things from you, Ethan, Ryan said, his voice low. And if I were you, I'd start asking why. Ethan walked away from his meeting with Ryan feeling more confused and unsettled than ever. Claire's story and Ryan's didn't align, and both seemed equally convincing in their own ways. If Claire was innocent, Ryan was clearly manipulating the narrative to cast doubt on her. But if Ryan was telling the truth, then Claire was hiding even more than she'd let on. The one thing Ethan knew for sure was that he couldn't take either of them at their word. He needed hard evidence, something undeniable to reveal who was lying and who was telling the truth. That evening, Ethan decided to do what he'd been avoiding, a deeper dive into Claire's life. After she fell asleep, he quietly unlocked her phone and began combing through her emails and messages again. He didn't find much at first, just routine work correspondence and casual chats with friends. But as he scrolled further, he found an email thread buried under a folder labeled Archived. The subject line read, Follow-up on accounts. Ethan's heart pounded as he opened it. The exchange was between Claire and Ryan, and it wasn't about work. Ryan, we need to discuss this in person. Too risky over email. Claire, I don't want to meet anymore. This has gone too far. Ryan, if you back out now, you're on your own. Don't forget, I'm not the only one who knows. Ethan stared at the screen, his stomach twisting into knots. What had gone too far? What wasn't safe to discuss over email? And who else knew about it? The next morning, Ethan confronted Claire again, this time armed with the email thread. What is this? He demanded, holding up her phone. Claire's face went pale as she looked at the screen. Ethan, where did you find that? Does it matter? He snapped. I want to know what it means. You told me Ryan was threatening you, but this makes it sound like you're involved in something with him. So which is it, Claire? Claire's hands trembled as she took the phone. She read the emails again, as though searching for the right words. Finally, she looked up at Ethan, tears welling in her eyes. "I was trying to protect you," she said quietly. "Protect me from what?" Ethan shouted. "Stop dodging the question and just tell me the truth." Claire sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. "It started as work," she said, her voice muffled. "But Ryan, he found something. About you." Ethan's blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" Claire looked up at him, her expression broken. "The lawsuit, Ethan. The one from years ago. He found out about it, and he's been using it to keep me in line." Ethan's chest tightened. The lawsuit was a chapter of his life he'd tried to bury, a mistake he'd made early in his career that had led to a costly settlement. He had moved on, or so he thought. "He told me that if I didn't cooperate, he'd make it public," Claire continued. "He said he'd spin it to make it look worse than it was, that he'd destroy your reputation. I didn't know what to do, Ethan. I couldn't let him ruin you." Ethan's mind raced. "So, what did he want from you?" Claire hesitated, her voice trembling. "At first, he just wanted information, access to files, clients, anything he could use to get ahead. I refused, but then he started threatening me. He said if I didn't help him, he'd drag you into it too. That's when I started meeting him, trying to figure out a way to stop him." Ethan sat down, his head in his hands. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I thought I could handle it," Claire said, her voice breaking. "And because I didn't want you to hate me for getting involved in the first place." Ethan looked up at her, his emotions a chaotic mix of anger, sadness, and disbelief. "Claire, I don't know what to believe anymore." That afternoon, Ethan called Ryan again, this time with a different strategy. "Ryan, I know everything," he said as soon as Ryan picked up. "The lawsuit, the threats, all of it. Claire told me everything." Ryan was silent for a moment before responding. "If she told you everything, then you know she's just as guilty as I am," he said calmly. "Guilty of what?" Ethan demanded. "Of helping me," Ryan replied. "She likes to play the victim, but let's not forget, she's the one who started giving me access to those accounts. I didn't force her to do anything. She chose to get involved." "You're lying," Ethan said through gritted teeth. "Am I?" Ryan said, his tone smug. "Maybe you should ask her why she was so willing to help me in the first place. Or better yet, why she didn't come clean until now. What else is she hiding, Ethan?" Ethan ended the call, his anger boiling over. Ryan's words were designed to sow doubt, and they were working. That evening, Ethan confronted Claire one final time. "Ryan says you helped him willingly," he said. "That you weren't just coerced, you were part of it." Claire's eyes widened in shock. "That's not true," she exclaimed. "I only did what he forced me to do." "Then why didn't you tell me sooner?" Ethan asked, his voice breaking. "Why did you wait until I found the emails to come clean?" Claire hesitated, her face crumpling. "Because I didn't think you'd forgive me," she admitted. "I made a mistake, Ethan. I didn't know how to fix it without making things worse." Ethan stared at her, his heart breaking. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to believe that Ryan was the villain and Claire was the victim. But the lies, the secrecy, the half-truths, it was all too much. "I need time to think," he said finally, his voice heavy with exhaustion. Claire reached for him, her eyes pleading. "Ethan, please." But he shook his head, stepping away. "I don't know if I can trust you anymore, Claire. And without trust, what do we have?" The house felt eerily quiet that night as Ethan lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Claire was asleep in the guest room. He had asked her to give him some space after their argument. His thoughts churned relentlessly, torn between the person Claire claimed to be and the secrets that had unraveled in recent days. Ryan's smug words replayed in his mind. She chose to get involved. Were they manipulation, or did they hold a kernel of truth? Ethan needed more than promises and excuses. He needed undeniable proof of what was really going on. The next morning, Ethan reached out to Ryan's assistant, Sarah, someone he briefly met at a work function Claire had dragged him to months earlier. She seemed sharp and observant, someone who might know more about Ryan's dealings than she let on. "Sarah, this is Ethan, Claire's husband," he said when she answered the phone. "Oh," she replied, her tone cautious. "Hi, Ethan. Is everything okay?" "I hope so," he said, keeping his voice steady. "I need to ask you something about Ryan. Off the record." Sarah hesitated, and Ethan pressed on. "Please. I think you know he's been up to something, and I need to know what it is. Claire is caught in the middle, and I'm trying to protect her." Sarah exhaled sharply. "Look, I don't want to get involved, but Ryan isn't exactly a saint." "What do you mean?" Ethan asked. "He's been skimming money from client accounts for months," Sarah said. "Nothing huge, just small amounts here and there, but it adds up. Claire found out a while ago, and she confronted him. That's when things got messy." "Messy how?" "Ryan started threatening her," Sarah admitted. "He said if she didn't keep quiet, he'd ruin her career." "But," she trailed off, her voice hesitant. "But what?" Ethan pressed. "I overheard something last week," Sarah said. "Ryan was on the phone with someone, and he mentioned Claire by name. He said he was going to make her the fall guy if everything came crashing down. He's setting her up, Ethan." Ethan's grip on the phone tightened. "Do you have proof of this?" "No," Sarah said. "But if you're looking for a smoking gun, check the company server. Ryan has a habit of leaving trails where he shouldn't." Ethan immediately called Claire, his heart racing. "Claire, I need you to listen carefully," he said when she picked up. "I talked to Sarah. She told me Ryan is setting you up. He's planning to pin everything on you if he gets caught." Claire was silent for a moment, then whispered, "Oh my God. You need to get into the company server," Ethan said. "If he's leaving trails, like Sarah said, we can find proof and take him down before he takes you down." Claire hesitated. "Ethan, I could get fired for accessing those files without permission. Do you trust me?" Ethan asked. "Yes," she said immediately. "Then do this," he said. "It's the only way to end this nightmare." That evening, Claire called Ethan with an update. "I found something," she said, her voice trembling. Ethan drove to her office immediately, and Claire showed him what she had uncovered, a folder buried deep in the company's server. Inside were falsified documents, manipulated spreadsheets, and email correspondence between Ryan and an unknown accomplice detailing how they'd been diverting client funds. One email stood out. "If Claire starts asking questions, we'll make it look like she authorized the transfers. Keep everything ready on your end." Ethan's blood boiled as he read the email. "This is it," he said. "This is what we need to take him down." The next morning, armed with the evidence, Ethan and Claire went straight to Ryan's boss, the CEO of the company. They laid everything out, emails, spreadsheets, and Sarah's testimony. The CEO listened carefully, his expression growing darker with every piece of evidence. "This is serious," he said finally. "If what you're saying is true, Ryan's actions could cost us millions, and destroy our reputation." "It's true," Claire said firmly. "And if you dig into his accounts, I'm sure you'll find more." Within hours, the company launched an internal investigation. Ryan was suspended immediately, his access to company systems revoked. Ethan and Claire waited anxiously as the investigation unfolded, unsure of what the fallout would be. 3 days later, the CEO called Claire into his office to deliver the verdict. "Your evidence was solid," he said. "We found additional discrepancies in Ryan's accounts, along with proof that he tried to frame you. He's being terminated, effective immediately. And the authorities are getting involved." Claire exhaled in relief, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she said. The CEO nodded. "Thank you for coming forward. It couldn't have been easy." That night, as Ethan and Claire sat together on the couch, the weight of the past few weeks began to lift. "I'm sorry," Claire said, breaking the silence. "For lying, for hiding things from you. I should have trusted you from the start." Ethan looked at her, his expression softening. "I'm sorry too," he said. "For not noticing sooner that something was wrong. We've both made mistakes, but we got through it." Claire nodded, resting her head on his shoulder. "I don't want any more secrets between us, Ethan. Ever." "Me neither," he said, wrapping an arm around her. For the first time in weeks, they felt like they were on solid ground. The shadows of doubt and betrayal had been cleared away, leaving room for trust to rebuild. But as they sat in the quiet of their living room, Ethan couldn't help but wonder, how had it gotten this far? And would they ever truly forget the photo that had started it all?